Well, hello, good morning and welcome. My name is Greg Ingham of Media Clash, publisher of Exeter Living, and welcome to our fifth Exeter Living Business Club, Emerging into the New World. We'll be hearing candid insights from disparate speakers on different areas of how we're all seeking to navigate through and respond to these continuingly strange times, personally, professionally, managerially. I hope you're all keeping well and staying as positive as we all can. We might as well be positive and give it a proper go. Keep optimistic, keep hopeful that the smart people and businesses here, plus Exeter's role as capital of the peninsula, will serve us all well in the coming months. One of the many paradoxes of the pandemic is that we've never been further apart, yet closer still. Just imagine if the pandemic had happened a few years back when Zoom wasn't even a thing. We've all seen inside each other's homes, on screen, but nonetheless inside still in a way that we wouldn't have done previously. And sure, that's one of the reasons why there's been such a surge in home improvements, design and home sales that we'll be chronicling in Exeter Living once more again soon. Our dwellings have been overlived in and on display, time for a spruce up or reworking to allow more home working, or even a move to places with more space, trading longer commutes for fewer days travelling. To that quaint 20th century legacy construct, an office, whatever that is. Who knows? We don't know these days, at least not as much. And we've all seen each other in full domestic mode, our attire and our attitudes more relaxed, more casual, more ruffled, more fallible. Just how do you unmute? More intruding kids and pets, in short, more ourselves. Remember those early September days of childhood when you put on unfamiliar, maybe unwanted school uniforms after endless weeks of shoeless summer? Well, that moment looms for some as they don the working armour of suits, heels, and even that bizarre signifier, ties. But we'll wager not as many as before. We've all been changed by this experience, and that's one of the key things we're going to be exploring. We shall see. These are times when we can all do with help of hearing others' experiences and thoughts and figuring out the months to come for our teams, our clients, and for us as business owners. Good luck, good wisdom to all Exeter businesses. 3 more things before we start. Please look out for the Exeter Property Awards, which will be held on May the 14th, a major celebration of all aspects of the sector, from resi to commercial and all businesses in the value chain, from architects to agents, legal and financial, developers, suppliers, and it's headline sponsored by Close Brothers. Other sponsorships are now available. We're opening those up as we now start to market these new awards, the Exeter Property Awards. It's a great opportunity to forge new relationships and to strengthen existing ones. One way or another, we'll all need all the help we can get to drive our businesses forward in 2021. Coming chronologically backwards, as you do, the Exeter Living Awards in 2021 will be held once more in the Great Hall of the University of Exeter on March 25th. The awards this year were pretty much the last thing we did as a company. They were on March 12th, and it was a tremendous celebration of the whole of the city. But of course, March 12th, that was just prior to lockdown and our world's completely changing. One last thing. Other big news, of course, is, as mentioned previously, that Exeter Living is returning. In barely 7 weeks, we'll be back, and we cannot wait. Our first issue will be published on October 2nd, when the world may well be feeling very different to how we think it feels just now. Just imagine what it was a few weeks back. Come the autumn, the world will change again. Like all independent businesses, we've been touched by the support that the business community here in Exeter has given us. We're all flesh and blood. We're all in the same storm, perhaps in different boats, and we're all in need of buoying up. And it's been great, the reception which we've had. Thank you. We're absolutely determined to play our part to the absolute full in this new world, celebrating the very best of the city, promoting the businesses, galvanizing business thinking, providing help and insight where we can, such as today, and maintaining what we hope is a plausibly positive tone, giving you reassurance about what is happening in Exeter. Hashtag Exeter Together. It's been important in these months to try and share the good that people do. We'll be hearing some of those stories later towards the end of the session. Please also look out for a planned series of business surgeries where we go into a deep dive, providing narrow but deep information on key business topics for free. Like all our business clubs, the one today, and our business surgeries, they will be available on our Exeter Living YouTube channel subsequently. If you have a professional service that would like to help others, please do talk to us. Right, on to our speakers today. You'll hear short interviews with each of our panelists, and please do send your questions through using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll pick up as many as we can. We'll be hearing, in this order, from Neil Finnie of Generator Hub, Sarah Martin of Nourish of Topsham, or Topsham, Nourish Zero Waste as it now is, Simon Girling of Girling Jones, and Andrew Hardwick, Global City Futures. Neil, if I could ask you to step forward, please.
Morning, Greg.
Good morning, Neil. You sound very cheery, sir. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. It's ironic that I'm actually working from home today and not at the space. It's my daughter's 10th birthday, so we're getting ready for 10 of her friends to come over for a garden.
Lovely. Well, we will keep this to just an hour, so you can go into full father mode and face paint and all else that I'm sure will be happening. But thank you for joining us this morning. Talk to us about the co-working space and about how this great pause has been for you, both personally, but also for the operation.
Yeah, okay, so the co-work space has been open for, the last 8 years. And we've kind of organically grown, the community's built. And, we took space on Extra Space kind of October last year with the idea that the community was growing, things are great. Obviously, that crystal ball we didn't have to be able to see the upcoming kind of predicament. So obviously the nature of what we do is flexible space, short contracts. It gives people that ability to grow, to contract, to leave, to come back. And it doesn't work that well in a global pandemic, that flexibility.
Most things don't, to be honest.
They don't indeed.
Prior to coming on to that, tell us the sorts of clients, the sorts of companies who've been using your space hitherto.
It's pretty diverse. We have small businesses. I think our biggest business, Codal, have probably about 10, 11 staff. But it's also freelancers, and it's from a range of industries as well. So it's quite eclectic. We've got developers, we've got social enterprises, we've got charities, we've got authors, a really big range, which is really interesting because, that diversity allows you to learn so much from different sectors, from different industries. That's pretty interesting.
And so what changes have you seen? And I'm assuming you're sort of back open in recent times.
So, we closed for a good couple of months. I think, the one thing that we saw at the beginning, number one, I want to really highlight this, is our community have been super supportive. It could have been a lot worse for us. But it was really humbling to see the community really kind of commit to wanting to see the space succeed in these times and to come out the other side. And especially financially, when a lot of the organizations were struggling as well, they wanted to make sure, that we could pay our rents and, we could look at keeping the space open for when they returned. And that's been, really rewarding considering, the effort that we've put in over the last 8 years to build that community, that it wasn't going to kind of crumble and wash away. I think, what we're seeing is a slow return to the space. I think, again, the majority of our users tend to have small kids. The schools being closed has obviously had an impact on that, where they've had to juggle childcare as well as their businesses. So I think, what we're expecting to see in September is a slight acceleration of the return to the space. But again, from our side, we want to make sure that people feel comfortable, which means having a really strong dialogue with them in terms of, what they need to be able to return to the space.
Let's pick up this point. It seems, this goes across multiple business areas. We'll be talking with Sarah about the retail perspective on this word of reassurance. It's clearly a big part of the hospitality sector, and one of the reasons why the Eat Out to Help Out campaign was launched, to encourage people. But how do you give people, your clients, reassurance that this actually is a safe space? I'm sure from a technical point of view, in terms of sanitizers and distancing and all else, that is
Yeah, I think
what about psychologically? How do you cope?
that's really important for us. And I think, Rena and Liz and the rest of the staff have been really proactive in speaking to people on an individual basis, because everyone has slightly different requirements and everyone has slightly, I guess, different needs in terms of what they need to be able to return. And it's only by really understanding that we can put measures into place. So I think, that open dialogue and that individual kind of rapport that we have with the community has been really important to make people feel comfortable. And it's also us providing flexibility for what they need to make them feel comfortable. And I think we didn't want to get into that knee-jerk reaction of we'll do this, we'll put up all this perspex screen and we'll kind of segregate this and we'll do this, because if the community didn't want it, if that made them feel that wasn't something they wanted to return to, then it was a wasted endeavor. And we wanted to make sure that we were putting in place the different aspects that our community needed. What we've seen so far is it's just making sure that the space isn't too densely populated. So, we took measures to actually stop hot desking and a lot of the kind of co-club memberships in the beginning, which is more flexibility, and provided just a space for our kind of permanent 24/7 users. So they had the space around them. As months go by, we will start opening up to the different parts of the community. But again, speaking to them what they need and then implementing that as we go.
And financially, you're navigating your way through this. This is clearly not going to be a great year, I'd imagine, for you, for virtually every business out there. But you can see your way through. Have you had loans into the businesses or grants?
Yeah, and again, I want to shout out to Exeter Council for this. They've been super supportive. They've been great in terms of what they've been doing with the business community. And I know some people will fall through the gaps, but they try as hard as they can to make sure that everyone's getting the support that they need. And I know a lot of our community also benefited from especially the discretionary grants that were available. So that was, very well appreciated from our side. Yeah, it will be financially difficult, but I think like many businesses, if we can get to that kind of magical break-even point and we can sit there for 12, 18 months, happy days. It's really about just kind of making sure that we're operational for this kind of next year. And then we can look at growth again. But I think, it's really difficult when there's such uncertainty. But it's slowly coming back.
Well, one last question at this stage, and we'll bring this up also as part of the panel discussion. In a sense, co-working hubs are almost the harbinger of how some businesses might be working going forward. They're sort of a cultural point. People go there not just because it's, quote, an office, because they're associating, being with people and so on. Do you see it that way, that is how offices will start to play out, that it'll have more of the social glue as opposed to the absolute literal desk-based working?
Yeah, it's just accelerated the kind of move towards this kind of environment. I think, you saw a lot in March and April, WFH, work from home, it's great. I think once you do that for a couple of months, you start realizing that the four walls you're confined to in your own home can be very difficult to live with. People are social beasts. We want to be around communities. We want the tribes around us. And, that's always kind of our essence of the Generator. We wanted to develop that. And I think that's how things will move in the future. I think we won't see companies give up their space. We'll see them maybe reduce. So if you've got 10,000, 5,000, 5,000, 2,000, or you'll start using flexible space. So it will increase. I think it's going to be the norm over the foreseeable future as people kind of start getting away from working from home and start kind of accessing different types of working environments.
Yeah, and different type of working practices as well. For now, thank you very much. If I can ask you to retreat, and we'll bring you back for the panel session shortly. And I'll now ask Sarah to come forward. Sarah Martin, Nourish of Toption, or rather, Nourish Zero Waste, a former winner of the Exeter Living Awards as well. So, Sarah, tell us, how have you been personally? And then also, how has business been?
Well, I've been okay. I'm a pretty positive person. I think my mental well-being much helped by the furlough scheme, I have to say. Right at the beginning, it was very scary before they announced that. I had staff who wanted to self-isolate, and so I was more worried about how my business would survive going forward. The furlough scheme was an absolute godsend for me. So yeah, generally, now I'm more on an even keel and more positive. But our garden's looking lovely after being furloughed. So, yeah.
And you reopened, what, 3-4 weeks back, was it?
We opened part-time on the 15th of May.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, just mornings, and then opened full-time, brought everybody back from furlough on about the 17th of June. So we've been able to go well now, yeah.
And on anything like a like-for-like basis of what you were doing the equivalent weeks a year back, how is trading for you?
Trading's down quite a lot. We're running at about 50 or 60% of what we were pre-lockdown. It was particularly busy just a couple of weeks before lockdown. Of course, everybody was panic buying toilet paper and pasta. Yeah, it is down. We're breaking even. I'm very grateful that we are one of the lucky companies who are breaking even, and we're moving in the right direction. Our takings are up week on week, so it's looking fairly positive.
It's interesting, both you and Neil are saying about you're breaking even now, he's got a plan to get to break even. We're all sort of redefining what success means, and you know, and dare I say, not perhaps for you necessarily, but survival is one definition of success in these current times. Tell us a little bit more about the nature of your business in this context. You've always been you've taken a far-sighted approach to business. Does it feel that the pandemic has accelerated concerns over specifically packaging?
I think so. I think when people were ordering from the supermarkets online in the height of lockdown, there weren't a lot of shops open, people were too scared to go out. And I think the online deliveries, I was having messages from people saying, we've just had a delivery from Ocado and I've got 31 plastic bags for 35 items of food. It's ridiculous. So I think there is a movement for that. There's a lot of concern about the PPE equipment being discarded. Beach Guardian particularly has been highlighting the issues of increased littering in terms of that kind of equipment. I think there is more awareness. I think the amazing pictures during lockdown of the goats in the village in Wales and the dolphins in Venice were a highlight of actually the impact we do have on the world and how quickly we can change our impact on the world for the better just by drawing ourselves back in a little bit.
But conversely, just to put this argument back to you, lockdown has also meant far more Amazon specifically, more couriers, and very definitely more cardboard. Do you think that change is now baked in now, that just as far more people are watching Netflix than were ever previously, far more people are using Amazon regularly, and that actually is a threat the other way because it will require more packaging, more waste, and more ecological damage?
Yes, my view on Amazon is pretty dim, to be honest.
Please say.
I think I was really worried that during lockdown, people would have got into the habit of using online services and online deliveries, and that would embed during that period, and it would be very hard for them to change their habits. It's taken a little while, but the last few weeks, as measures have eased, have seen a huge return of people coming back to the shops and being really grateful that we're open and really happy to not be ordering online anymore. I think there's a move towards supporting smaller local industries and buying, for example, I know the veg box schemes from greengrocers and local butchers went really bananas during lockdown, and I really hope that's something that continues, that people are buying hyper locally essentially.
I think that hyper local point is really interesting, because one of the other facets that's happening, which is a consequence of more working from home, is that people are spending more within 10 minutes walk of where they live. So it's the smaller communities rather than city centres which are benefiting. And the other point which we've been very much pushing with Exeter Living is that lockdown is making everything local, that we're all that much more aware of our locales, but also businesses such as yours offering a very different type of service than is available elsewhere. But I want to come back to the point about reassurance with customers. All different sorts of customers have different levels of anxiety or doubt about even stepping outside their homes in current times. How do you attempt to reassure them beyond those points I mentioned earlier with Neil about the distancing and masks and sanitizers and so on?
I think it's really important that people know that their concerns are absolutely fine. We have people who are happy to come into the shop and serve themselves. We have people who don't want to come into the store and we serve them to the door, and that's fine. We have people who don't want to come out to the high street at all, so they phone up an order and we have it ready for them to collect, so they're spending the minimum amount of time possible. We've got a few customers who are still isolating because of their medical conditions, and for them we have been able to deliver to them as well. So I think a lot of it is an acknowledgement that the concerns are absolutely valid and that we can do anything we can to help work within their comfort areas rather than forcing them to come into a shop and do something they're really not happy with.
In a sense, what you're saying there is the sort of strikingly obvious, the basics of business, which is understanding your customers' needs. In our world of magazine publishing, we used to have we'll still have a mantra about understand your readers' needs and then satisfy them. And give or take, that's what you've pretty much articulated, that it's no longer a service top-down given, which it may or may not have been for many businesses previously. It's the other way around. What do they want and how can I provide it, I guess. So that's one potential change. What other business changes would you see as a result of this period in your business specifically?
I think that what was very interesting is we've had a surge in new customers because they were walking past the shop on the early stages when they were allowed to go out and exercise, and they didn't know we were there before. So they were taking more interest in the very local area because they weren't getting in their cars and driving to work. So the shop in Magdalen Road has been open for 18 months. We still get people coming in expecting it to be the brand tub, which was there for 35 years beforehand. Fair play. But I think people have been walking around and said, oh, we never noticed your shop before. We were walking past and we thought we'd come in and have a look. So I think that's one thing. The other thing we've seen is a huge increase in people walking and cycling to both of our stores. Approximately 90% of our custom at the moment is people who walk or cycle. And I've noticed that these are the people who were our regulars before as well. So it's been a huge insight. We've been doing a little bit of a transport survey to see how people are coming into the stores. And by foot or by bike has been more than it was before, I think. I don't think we're losing custom because people aren't driving out to locations. I just think people are choosing different methods of transport at the moment.
And let's hope that that endures directly for your business, but for all businesses, that sense of locality, independence, support, but yes, literally the route to market, whether it's walking or cycling, the benefit it brings. Sarah, for now, let's ask you to retreat and come back to the panel session in a moment. So thank you for that. Let's come on to Simon Girling. Simon Girling for Girling Jones, who'll tell us about your business. Oh, he's got his thumbs up. Very positive.
How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. You were one of our judges that I mentioned about Exeter Living Awards getting away just before that lockdown, and it was a lovely celebration. And you know, we're all in some way, I'm sure, looking forward to that and other celebrations and so on. Tell us a little bit more about your business as a construction, property engineering recruitment company. What do you do and what have you not been able to do in recent times? How's it been for you?
Okay, so we essentially place construction professionals into construction firms and consultancies, predominantly within the southwest, so probably Bristol down to the tip of Cornwall. Recruitment in general, any kind of uncertainty is not great for recruitment. One of the first things people do or businesses do is certainly put on hold hiring and expanding, those sorts of things. So in terms of how it's been, it's pretty much turned the taps off for our business, certainly on permanent vacancies we had on the contract side. Again, that was hugely reduced.
And how many people on your team, and then how many were furloughed?
Yeah, so we've got 18 staff currently down here, and we've got 4 up in Newport. So we started working from home for about 2 weeks. Very quickly we realised that this was just not the time to be doing any business. It just wasn't the right time to be. People had much more important things to do. So I made the difficult decision to put the whole team on furlough, apart from myself and my office manager, which felt very, very strange initially. It also meant I had to actually do some work. So I was, home office stroke, in my bedroom. Yeah, it was very odd at first, but it was the right decision. I took them all up, you know, cozy in bed for 3 months. And then we've got the majority of them back now. Our final 4 will be coming back at the beginning of September. So thankfully, we've been very lucky that we've not had to make any redundancies, and the whole crew will be back. But yeah, there was a very, I have to say, quite a nice 3 months of you know, getting back in the trenches, and actually it was an interesting time. People wanted to talk. You know, being in recruitment, normally people are like, so it was yeah, it was an interesting few months, but you know, we were very lucky, and a lot of people in a lot worse positions than ourselves, and that. So
and the sort of clients you're working with, what sort of time horizons do they have? Presumably the large projects, it takes, you know, that much longer, so many will put on pause. So how does your next few months look in terms of pipeline of the clients you're dealing with and their timescales?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, in construction, people are used to working with health and safety right at the top of their the key things that are important. So very quickly, most of our clients had done all their risk assessments, got safe ways of working, safe processes in place, PPEs already there anyway. But initially, actually, there was a stigma to working, if you remember, right back in sort of April, May time, and you know, building sites, if they were still running, where people were giving them odd views. And once that had dissipated, the issue was then on supply chain, and actually just one part of one material can stop a site if you can't get it delivered. Things, you know, really cracked on in earnest from June, and most companies had most of their sites up and running, and they are now, you know, sort of running at full tilt. The problem you've got is new projects, new planning, new sign-offs. But again, to be fair, the feeling, certainly in the Southwest, certainly within construction, is very positive, and has been all the way through. It's quite a can-do industry anyway, and you know, so I think, yeah, it's quietly positive. Don't get me wrong, it's a jungle out there, but I think, again, a lot of the guys and girls that work here, we've gone through the 2008 recession, where again we were thinking, what's wrong with the phones, what's happening here? So actually we're a little bit leathery, and we expected it was going to be tough, and it has been, but you know.
But for some people, when it comes to permanent jobs, has there been a reluctance to consider swapping their jobs, their careers and so on in these times?
Yeah, you've got all sorts of things pushing against the permanent recruitment process. People don't want to, you know, rock the ship at a time like this. People don't want to, you know, take any kind of additional risk on. And on top of that, you've got, unfortunately, a huge amount of redundancies that's still coming through. So the amount, the candidate pool, the people that you're going to be going up against is much greater than normal. What I would say, there's been a really, really broad range of how well companies have treated and communicated with their staff over lockdown, from fantastic weekly calls, weekly Zoom meetings, you know, constantly just keeping people who are, you know, on the face of it, are being paid to sit at home. So you think they might be just loving it, but actually there's a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety that comes from that. So companies been fantastic, and some firms have been absolutely terrible. And so what we've actually found is that some people that you might, you know, not expect to be on the market, or might not expect to be interested in roles, thinking, well, I'm just not happy with how I've been treated here. And it's kind of shone a light, I think, on some management and how people run things.
I think it's a very good point, that communication has been ever more paramount in these times, and inevitably it will be variable between companies. That some companies, of course, will be so concerned even about survival, they're not necessarily thinking about their teams in quite the same way. Others, it's been almost solely about communication, because there hasn't been much business, and there's, you know, beyond having some sense of how to write a budget with £0 for several months, it is a question of keeping your teams involved, engaged, motivated. But tell me this, aside from Zoom calls, of course, with clients and teams, what else have you changed in the business, or what are you likely to change in how you run the business going forwards?
It's interesting, actually, because we had a big brainstorm session with the whole team yesterday, because I'd sort of thought, you know, if we come out of this with nothing changed, it would be a real waste, because there's been some real positives and some things that a lot of us have really enjoyed. I mean, since we brought people back, we've said at the moment, certainly until September, until the whole team's back, you know, it's totally flexible. If you've got kids at home, if you've got pets at home with no dog walkers or whatever, you can work from home whenever you want. There are no rules, but you know, everyone here has been absolutely fantastic. No one's taken the mickey, and so we've been very flexible. We've always been a suited and booted kind of place, so we're all dressed down, and we have been, you know, since coming back. So everything's become a little looser. But interestingly, yesterday I said, okay, going forward, you know, do we want to have a situation where we all work from home 2 days or 3 days a week? You know, something like that. So that was on the cards. Do we want to keep casual dress and maybe just have formal dress for meetings and interviews? What about finishing work? I mean, we've been cracking off at sort of 3:30, 4 o'clock, which is fairly unheard of for us every day. Do we want to reduce the time we're in the office and a few other bits and pieces? And interestingly, apart from the finishing at 4 o'clock every day, most people have said, well, we'd like the flexibility to work from home, but actually we really like being in the office, and echo what, you know, Neil had said. We like the feel, the community, the tribe. You know, talking about people actually say, well, I quite like coming in and putting a suit on and being smart to work, because it means it's different from what I'm doing at home. So actually, I think there'll certainly be some flexibility and some changes, but there will also be, for us, you know, I think there will be some go back to some of the traditions. What I would say though, we've always been, I mean, as part of our company green statement, one of our big things is reducing business miles and obviously carbon footprint off the back of that. And we also extend that to the miles that our candidates do in terms of interviews. And we've been pushing for years, you know, Skype calls, Zoom calls, and Teams, and it's just always fallen on deaf ears. No one's ever wanted to do it. It's now been enforced, obviously. So, you know, we've been watching, you know, hairy-ass construction managers trying to grapple with the complexities of Zoom. But actually, I think that's here for the taking now, and that's here for good. And actually, I think, you know, again, echoing what you've been saying previously, you know, those sorts of things are going to mean that, yeah, people are much more efficient with their time, and equally, there's not going to be as many people driving around. So I think that's going to be a real change, certainly for the recruitment industry and interviewing.
Good. Well, we hope the sector prospers strongly and your business fully recovers and so on. And we, of course, also have an eye on our Exeter Property Awards next May. So, you know, I'm sure there'll be some interesting conversations around that as we attempt to bring, I think the phrase Neil used earlier, all the tribes together, and that's what we're seeking to do. But for now, Simon, if I could ask you to step back, and we'll ask Andrew to step forward. So thank you for that. Andrew Hardwick, Global City Futures. Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm well, actually, Andrew. Thank you. Tell us in a nutshell, and you've got a complex brief here, so this will be quite hard. In a nutshell, what have you been seeking to do? Set the scene with Exeter City Futures, please.
Yeah, so in essence, Exeter City Futures are an independent community interest company. So by such, we're designed to be, you know, as I said, completely independent, but ultimately all of our activity should bring benefit to the community that we serve, which is, you know, Exeter. So in that respect, it remains unchanged. And ultimately, we're here to enable Exeter, whether it's a resident, whether it's a community, whether it's, you know, a large organisation, a small independent business, a public sector, private sector, third sector. It's enabling all of those types of organisations and people to achieve the net zero plan for Exeter, which is obviously 2030. So pretty broad, you're right, pretty complicated, but that's the essence of what we're here to do, really, be the facilitator and coordinator of bringing together all of those communities, organisation and leadership to achieve the net zero goal by 2030.
And presumably, I mean, the strategy hasn't changed, the intent hasn't changed. It's baked into your, you know, constitution, your rationale, and so on. But the tactics presumably have changed in these months. How has it been for you in this time?
Yeah, I mean, really interesting. I mean, there's lots of points to that. So you've got the personal element of I've joined during that stage. So I've, you know, replaced or followed Liz O'Driscoll, who was the previous MD, and, you know, I've gone through the recruitment stage, and it's all been very virtual and Skype and Zoom based. And then I've joined a new team and had to sort of really get to speed with that. And that was a potential threat of how do you introduce yourself and ingrain yourself to a new team when you can't actually meet them in person, and how will that pan out? Thankfully.
Well, and how have you done that then? Tell us.
Well, again, it's really sort of embracing technology, all of the different formats, you know, being really open, really transparent, very genuine and authentic. And to your point earlier, I think some of that's been actually helped. I think the fact that you're sat in your home and your kids burst in or the dog starts barking actually sort of humanizes us, all of us. And I think that's actually a theme that I picked up from the team very early, actually, is that interestingly, some of them who have been with Exeter City Futures for, you know, a number of years have found out more personal information about their colleagues than they have when they were sat next to the desk to them for 2 years previously. And that is quite interesting, how you can be sort of more distant, further apart, but in some ways more connected. So that's been fascinating to see.
Well, we had that right at the very beginning with Neil. I think we all discovered he's got a 10-year-old daughter whose birthday is today. And as a tiny sort of element, that of itself is about us all learning and being more open with each other during it. Let's talk about the, again, one of the paradoxes. We've talked about being never further apart and yet closer still. Also, during this time of great pause, it at least has potentially been a time of great acceleration. We've moved forwards in some of our thinking. Is that how you see it, given your vista about what you're seeking to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think what that great pause has given everyone to do, whether it's organisation or individual, I think it's given real time to slow down, reflect, reevaluate, you know, how they live, how they interact, how they work, you know, how their businesses operate. And I think certainly a lot of conversations I've had in the last 2 months since joining has been around, you know, are you worried? Do you see a real threat to the net zero journey? Is the pandemic really going to disrupt that and sort of delay you? I'm actually more in the camp that says, no, I actually, in a weird way, think it might be one of the real positives to come from the pandemic. It's brought lots of suffering, you know, financial loss, physical loss, disruption. But I think what it has done is actually made people think very differently and actually forced people to behave differently. And I think it shows people what is possible when you have to do something. So yeah, I certainly, the theme I've had from talking to lots of people, lots of organizations, is actually really this is the time for action. This is the time that if we're having to make a change anyway, how do we make a change that's most beneficial? Now, whether you call that building back better or recovery, but there is definitely a theme of and we've been busier than ever. Exeter City Futures in that time has been more active. We've had more sort of approaches. We've worked with more people, more organisations, and it's all around actually, if we're having to make these changes to our ops model and the way our colleagues work and how they interact, how do we do that in the most informed way that we actually achieve a better outcome and a more sustainable business for not only now, but next year, 5 years, 10 years?
I've heard some of these much bigger and important structural changes referred to in this way. It's like a triple level of mortality. It sounds terrible, like a bad heavy metal album. There's personal mortality, the brush that one way or another we all might have feared having, and have friends, relationships, and so on. So there's that. There's the corporate mortality, and we've heard a little element of that today about how tough it is to do business in these times, and not all businesses will make it. Then, of course, brings to the bigger point. Well, what about the overall sort of mortality of the planet? If we are not taking this time to do something, to think differently and act differently, then we're missing the point about this massive, great wake-up call. Do you see it in that way, or is that too sort of messianic or whatever?
No, I think you're correct. I think there's probably a couple of things that spring to mind to the point you just raised. I think firstly, some of those issues, or many of those issues for businesses, and we've done a lot of work on this, particularly around, you know, retail and that sort of thing, the high street, the issues that are driving the business challenges were already there. The pandemic haven't caused them. What they've actually done is exacerbated them, and probably expedited the journey time for the day of reckoning, perhaps. But actually, the actual nuts and bolts of the issues aren't linked to the pandemic. The pandemic just obviously made it worse. And to your point, I think it absolutely is that, because I think everyone has had a glimpse of what could be. They've seen Exeter, that, you know, is a very vibrant, progressive, innovative city, you know, brilliantly, or its development over the last sort of 15 years has been a marvel to witness. But with that has come a lot of extra traffic, a lot of extra congestion. I think people have actually seen a glimpse of what life could be with less congestion, with, you know, better air quality, with the ability to think, actually, I can choose to walk today to my local shop, or I can jump on my bike, and I feel more confident about my children being able to play out on their bikes or play football, which wouldn't have been provided if we didn't have had the lockdown and didn't have pandemic. So I think I am an eternal optimist, but I do believe that is a very big silver lining to sort of shaping people's thinking, shaping decision, and critically shaping the future, because clearly there is a lot to do, and, you know, we need some seismic change and brave leadership to achieve that.
I can imagine there'll be a number of companies, individuals on this call, watching it on YouTube later, who directionally would wholly agree, because from as you've articulated it, there is virtually nothing to disagree with for virtually everyone, I'd have thought. However, what should they do? How can they engage with this process? What sort of support or connection are you looking for from the companies of Exeter?
I guess in essence is we don't profess to have all of the ideas, all of the solutions. It's a very, very complex area, and, you know, there's a million different ways you could do things. We've released a net zero Exeter plan just before lockdown in April. It's been really well received. It's been adopted by lots of organisations. Exeter City Council, literally a couple of weeks ago, formally adopted it as the city plan. And I think what we would encourage is come and interact with us, come and talk to us, collaborate with us. It isn't a one-cap-fits-all solution. There are no silver bullets to this situation. And depending whether you're an independent sole trader, or whether you're a big organisation, or if you're an individual resident, what you're needing to do, the behaviour change, the policy change, you know, the ops model change of your business will be unique and different to all of those entities. It's around how they fit within that net sort of zero plan framework, and how we can help that. We can sort of join the dots, facilitate, we can link people and share best practice. It's around continually learning, continually sharing, you know, being really responsive, really innovative, and ultimately collaborating, you know, celebrating success where we have it, and also being honest enough to say, actually, that hasn't worked well enough and we haven't got good enough, because we're monitoring it and we can track it. And just so we're making really, really good informed decisions at every level, really. And that's what I'd encourage, is come and interact with us, because that's what we're here to do, really. We're here to enable.
I suspect that from an overall point of view, there's also the extra point is pride in the city, for Exeter to be an exemplar in this area, that it has that opportunity as a progressive city that has the connections, has in our experience, I can say it's you know, reasonably objectively, a very enlightened council that connects well and thinks deeply. So what I'd like to do now is to bring our other panelists back in, and I want to pick up that point of collaboration. So if Simon, Neil and Sarah could rejoin. Hello, good to see you again. So this point about collaboration, and again, another element of the pandemic accelerating change. Are you seeing more signs of collaboration than you would have done previously, do you think? Or not?
Yeah, I think from my side, there's definitely a commitment to see everyone go through and come through this to the other side. And I think that's really kind of fostered that kind of desire to work together and collaborate. I think people are far more open in terms of kind of what they want, their horizons, and willing to partner with people they maybe wouldn't have before. So it's definitely from my personal experience.
I was quite touched, actually, how many Exeter businesses I was in touch with, certainly at the sort of beginning and middle of lockdown, people I know that I didn't necessarily talk to all the time, but we ended up having, you know, virtual coffees, or, you know, virtual hugs, and just, you know, whether it be just a bit of a sanity check with somebody. Certainly a lot of businesses down on the quay, we were all talking, giving each other heads up on the various grants or tips and tricks of what they were finding was working at the moment. Even, you know, a couple of the Exeter living judges, we were sort of having some chats and stuff like that. And actually it was really nice, and it was really, certainly as a business owner where you haven't really got many people to kind of sound off against, I was really touched at how the local community, we all sort of rallied together and looked after each other. So I'd like to think that will continue. It certainly is at the moment, but yeah.
And Sarah, you give me the impression that collaboration is just a key part of how your modus operandi is. That has that actually been accelerated in these times?
I think so, and I think particularly small retail businesses who are really struggling to improve their visibility. For example, we have a Topsham Traders Facebook page in Topsham, and we're collaborating to like each other's posts or to so that it increases our visibility using the Instagram algorithms and things like that, just to support each other. There was a lot of conversation between different retailers and the pubs in Topsham, particularly about the grants that were available and the discretionary funds that were available, just to make sure that everybody knew that I'll impart my information to everybody else and we'll do the same. I think the kind of summer of love in Exeter, the kind of supporting each other, and I particularly have noticed the ethical brands, the other ethical shops in Exeter doing shout outs quite a lot on social media. So Sancho's, for example, and I have a mutual loving relationship in terms of recommending each other to our shoppers because we have the same ethical background.
That's really good. Are you as individuals as optimistic as you were previously? You each strike me as very optimistic, as positive people as start points. But are you as optimistic now than perhaps Feb, March time or some such?
Yeah,
personally, in terms of coming in and looking at the remit of Exeter City Futures, I definitely believe that there has been a big change and a big sort of reevaluation. And I think if we handle that, and if every organisation handles that right, there could be lasting change in benefits. But obviously that's quite specific, our remit versus some of the businesses that we...
Well, your remit is so broad and so important that it encompasses pretty much, every business, every organization, one way or another. So it matters if you have that, leading from the front perspective. How about you, Neil or Sarah? How's your levels of optimism, both your businesses, but perhaps slightly broader in terms of Exeter and its recovery development in 2021?
I think from my side, most people that I've come across, especially business owners, stay positive. You have to have that positivity anyway. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity that comes from this, of different ways of working. And I think personally from my side, whether it be the co-work space or culturally with the training that we do, we already saw this future of work. We've just accelerated towards that point. So for me, I can see a lot of benefits personally for the businesses that we have. Of course, there's a few hurdles to get over initially, but I think the way in which we work, in which we appreciate our life, we were going towards that stage, and hopefully this is a bit of a wake-up call that allows us to get there far quicker. So I'm super positive in terms of the next 12 months, and hopefully we can really learn from this and use it as a way to progress.
And Sarah, for Exeter, well, and Topsham, of course, how do you see that sort of recovery? We've obviously, many people use the expression bounce back. That personally, I have to say, that feels a bit active. I think it's much less sort of buoying up. It's going to be whatever shape. But how do you see business development in the 12 months ahead?
I think the bounce back probably is a little more of a creep at the moment, to be quite honest. But like everyone else has said, we have to be optimistic as business owners. And I think some of the measures that have been put in place because of the COVID restrictions are actually going to help in terms of the larger issues that we have. So we're talking about the net zero project Andrew was talking about. And I think on Magdalen Road, we've had a cycle lane put in and an extended pavement. It's a little bit contentious amongst some of the traders on the street. I'm not all for it, I have to say. But I think that those changes are going to have to take place anyway to reduce the amount of carbon emissions within Exeter Centre. And this was a really good opportunity for us to be able to see what that looks like without it being permanently in place, so that we can adjust our business models at this time. And when the full consultation comes in October, hopefully people will be much more positive about it. Some of these things are going to happen anyway, and the way we work is going to change anyway, as we have to adapt to climate change. And I think this is a really good opportunity to get some of those changes in sooner rather than later.
Yeah, don't let a pandemic go to waste or whatever. It sounds like a slightly cynical point, but we've had that jolt, so we're now in a different place, and we should be thinking differently. Is part of the argument. Simon, from your point of view, how do you see Exeter's recovery play as a city overall in a broader sense? It's hospitality, it's business, it's cultural offering, and so on.
My question mark actually is around the high street. I think in terms of more generally the area, Devon, the southwest, there's so much opportunity, there's so much happening in terms of construction, whether it be housing, larger projects, there's all sorts of stuff going on. I question what's going to happen with the high street in general, having been up and down, at least once a week over the last month. I have no answer to this, and I find it interesting because it's going to be a challenge, but I just don't feel that people are traditionally going to want to go and, do the big shop or the big wander around. It's even less attractive than it was. So, hey, I haven't got an answer to that, but that's probably my one question for Exeter is what's going to happen to the city.
It's a question for Exeter, it's a question for the whole country, and it's specifically a question for Sarah, I guess, about, if not quite the future of the high street, but face-to-face retail, absolutely your world. How do you respond to this and other points about how the high street is going to prosper or not?
It's a really difficult one. I think that the way I'm seeing it at the moment, the small high streets, the local shopping areas, so like Magdalen Road, like Fall Street on Topsham, are doing fairly well considering, because they're smaller environments, they're less threatening. We've had people who've come to the shops because they don't want to go into Exeter city centre. That confidence isn't there to go into the city centre. So they're looking for places that are smaller, that have maybe less footfall, where they feel a little bit safer, where they're going to smaller shops where they can talk to the owner of the shop and see exactly what's happening. And it's a smaller environment which feels safer, I think, at the moment. I am concerned about the general high street and the big brands. I think, although they should have a wake-up call for this in terms of their sourcing and supply chain and their ethics, I'm not sure that's going to happen. But the city centre is important for the vibrancy of a city and the feel of a city. So I am concerned that there will be a general trend downwards in people visiting city centres.
Well, I mean, just to give a slightly counter-argument to some elements of that whilst close attention to supply chain, the provenance, the authenticity, many of the issues which lots of people have talked about, and you've talked about previously. In current times for businesses, it is simply about survival, and now perhaps isn't a time for them to spend. They might argue to spend a lot of time working out the provenance of their goods. They've just got to bloody well sell what they can. How do you sort of marry that short-term need with longer-term sense of important values?
I think that if you're selling products that are detrimental to your supply chain, you're cutting off your own lifeblood. So I think that particularly with climate change, if your business models are relying on short-term gains rather than a long-term view, regardless of how hard you're trying to survive, you're actually throttling where you're getting all of your resources from. And so it's not going to be a long-term solution.
Andrew, I'd imagine you broadly concur with that. How do you think companies can, it's a weighted question this, but maintain or indeed extend their sense of ethics and value in a time of, well, frankly, desperation for some, or at least, very, very, very difficult to see how they're going to continue trading?
Yeah, I mean, we've done quite a lot of work on this. So a couple of months ago, we had a retail roundtable, which was all designed to sort of aid, the high street and retailers and traders. My background, coincidentally, before this was 10 years at Tesco. I was a retail director for Tesco. So my retail knowledge is pretty good. And I think there's a few things. There's definitely been an emergence of a change in habits, again, linked to, almost 15-minute neighbourhoods. I know you mentioned this sort of 10-minute time at the beginning, but definitely sort of localised and walking has become more and more relevant. Again, to my earlier point, the challenges those big retailers and small retailers have faced aren't new. They've been looking into that for some time because of their sort of economic models and you know, even how do you make online profitable and all of those things. They will have some contingency plans in place. The reality is I guess the tsunami of having to make these decisions has come earlier, that where they may have thought they've got 18 months, 2 years, they've suddenly got, you know, 12 weeks to shape that. And I guess my feeling would be not all will make it, because that's quite obvious. But those who've got the clearest idea of their strategy and what they stand for will always have the best chance, because I think people naturally connect and buy in to that if they can understand, I like this brand because I get a sense of why they operate, and it isn't just about selling products. I think also it comes down to becoming much more compelling. I think it almost that back to basics approach becomes really important, excelling on the shopping experience, on the customer service, on the product offer, having a good pricing structure becomes really, really key. And probably also embracing innovations, working more collaboratively, use of technology, online, all of those things. They're going to have to do all of those things to have a fighting chance, would be my view.
And I guess also with consumer pressure, to the point about provenance or packaging, that for all forms of retailers, the largest of Tesco through to the smallest of independents, one way or another, because consumers are more focused on it, all will have to respond. I guess that is the argument, irrespective of whether or not they may or may not choose to. They haven't got much choice, because pressure will be applied. Okay, I'm aware that we're pretty much out of time, but I did want to end with a couple of thoughts from our panel. We've been very much pushing during this time with Exeter Living, through the hashtag Exeter Together, the good that people do. It is remarkable that in the toughest of times, people do show their best in a supportive way, collaborative, as you've each talked about today. So I think we've got a couple of quick stories. I'll ask Simon and then Neil and then Sarah in that order. So Simon, your thoughts on Sarah, the good that people do.
There was tons of stories, I think, of people helping out, whether it be neighbours or friends or other businesses. I suppose my favourite was our local Morrison's ended up having like a whole sort of back lorry of Easter eggs that they couldn't do anything with. And so a good friend of mine, Vic Becker, he went out and I think he probably did about 25 shuttle runs to schools and shelters and charities in the area, just sort of, throwing out Easter eggs from the back of the car. So I thought I was quite touched when I heard that.
I'm not so sure about the throwing out Easter eggs in the back of cars. I can see one or two structural problems with that as an idea, but sounds like a very good initiative, and well done to your friend for that. Neil, your thoughts?
I think it's seeing people not wanting to financially gain out of this situation. Personally, at the Generator, we've offered discounts to a lot of our community, of which some have refused and wanted to pay the full rate to support us because they could, because their businesses are fine. And then also in the current kind of eat out, where people have gone to these restaurants and because they're doing well in their businesses, again, have been willing to pay that full amount. They'll leave the tip of the difference between the 50% that they would be getting on the food. And that's really nice to see that people aren't just taking the handouts that are there. They're thinking, actually, I can afford this. So let me financially give and try and support those businesses that need help. And that was really kind of humbling to see.
And Andrew, your sense of, I don't know, perhaps the collaboration or something in that sense of how the smart, decent thinking that people and organisations have had in these times.
Yeah, the one that stands out, and it's probably relevant to our conversation today, that's sprung into my head as we've sort of some of the things we've touched on, is Dan at Grocer on the Green. Because again, a very traditional greengrocers, but in doing the right things with the lockdown and making sure he looks after his family and looks after his team, he completely pivoted and changed his business model, was taking orders by mobile phone and text message and Facebook messages, went 100% delivery, completely pivoted his business. And then I know, I think the local church gave some of their community centre space to help enable his operation. And I think, given what we've talked about today, that's a real nice example of community spirit, but also innovative thinking, responsiveness, collaboration. That's one that stood out for me.
Yeah, really good. That's lovely. And Sarah, your thoughts here?
I've been particularly impressed by one of the charities, Estuary League of Friends. Their support to vulnerable people in and around the Topsham area, the surrounding areas. And even though they've had some real funding restrictions, all of their shops have been closed, for example, and the hub in Topsham has been closed for quite a long time, they're still managing to support vulnerable people, taking them meals every day that they can order, even choices of meals that they can order every day, which is more than I get. And it's just wonderful to see these people rising up and volunteering and doing these things, even though the funding might not necessarily be there to support that immediately.
It's lovely of you to give a shout out to Estuary League of Friends, and perhaps just to broaden the point, as you touched on at the end there, that charities have, there has never been a greater need for charities, and their funding has never been more precarious. And I'm sure there are many businesses here and individuals who've supported the charities of Exeter who are then able to do the extra good that they do in these times. We're going to close at that point. I think it's been a really interesting, good session, and thank you to all of our panelists. To Neil of Generator Hub, Sarah, Nourish Zero Waste, Simon of Girling Jones, and Andrew Hardwick of Global City Futures. To all of you, thank you very much indeed. Please check out our forthcoming Exeter Living business surgeries when they start shortly, including sessions on employment and HR, financial planning, commercial property and such like. I mentioned the Exeter Property Awards. Please look out for those. The comms will be ramping up pretty shortly on that. And we'll be thrilled to get that off the ground. Likewise with the Exeter Living Awards, I know there's good connections from at least 2 of you to those previously. And good luck to everyone navigating these tough times. And let's hold to the belief that, as our panelists have said, that enduring good can come from this. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been the Exeter Living Business Club. Thank you. Exeter together. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.